Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I am Drew Evans. I'm the superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Shortly after 1 p.m. yesterday, on Wednesday, December 3rd, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Financial Crimes and Fraud special agents working in coordination with Michigan authorities apprehended Bryce Campbell, the owner of Lutsenresort Lodge, for the 2024 fire that destroyed the lodge. He was taken into custody without incident and is currently in custody in Oakland County, Michigan.
Joe.
Julie.
It is just after 6 p.m. on December 4th, 2025. How are you feeling?
It's been a day. It
Yeah.
has been a day, yeah.
It has. And we're going to get into all of that.
I think before we do, I want to introduce you to the listeners.
Right, because they don't know who I am.
Well, they've heard your name in every episode. Julie Censullo, the story editor for this podcast. And now you're making your debut, your voice. And
That's right.
yeah, so let's get into what happened today.
Yeah. Well, for me, what happened was you called me at, I think, 8 a.m. But what did you wake up to this morning?
I woke up to a cup of coffee like I always do, and it was about 7:45 this morning, and my phone rang, and it was a number that said State Fire Marshal. I had emailed the State Fire Marshal. That was on Wednesday, December 3rd, at 7:45 a.m. Wednesday, and just checking in. I've done this basically every 6 weeks. His name's Dan Cryer. I emailed the communications person, Kat Barrett. This is Joe in Grand Marais. Do you have any updates? I also said yesterday when I checked in, are there any updates to share? And do you expect there will be any information before the end of 2025, now that we're in the last month of the year? Didn't hear anything all yesterday, which is actually quite unusual because usually they get back to me within a couple of hours and it's, no, thanks for checking in.
Yeah.
We'll let you know.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything all day yesterday. Then this morning, 7:45, State Fire Marshal lights up on my caller ID on my cell phone. Have a conversation with the fire marshal, and he says that there will be an event in Grand Marais on Friday. He says, keep your schedule open.
And he doesn't necessarily say what it is, right? He just says something's happening.
He makes it pretty clear to me that there are going to be charges, but he says your county attorney is going to be leading this meeting at the courthouse in Grand Marais. So make of that what you will, Joe. Wink, wink type thing. And he said the state fire marshal, the lead investigator, was going to be there. People from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, people from which is now sort of interwoven with the Commerce Fraud Bureau in Minnesota. Like it was going to be a big press conference at the courthouse in Grand Marais Friday sometime. Wow. Okay. Huge. Thanks for the call. Call you. Get off the phone with him. Call you.
Yeah, I was not finished with my coffee yet at this point.
Well, let's cut to just a bit of our conversation.
Yeah, tell me what's up.
It's going down tomorrow. I mean, information's going to come out later today.
Yeah.
The state fire marshal just called me. It's like 8 a.m. My heart is literally in my throat. I'm pacing around. Like, there's going to be a media event in Grand Marais tomorrow, and he's like, you won't have far to go.
So when you called me, you said that your heart is beating in your throat. What were you feeling in that moment?
I was pacing around. I had an interview coming up like at 9 o'clock, so about an hour after I get this call that was also kind of heavy about people missing in the Boundary Waters. Turned my phone off for that interview for about an hour, and I turn it back on, and there's a new message from the fire marshal. Joe, call me back. It's an emergency type thing.
Yeah.
Call him back. The press conference is actually happening today in St. Paul, so leave now. And it's like 11 o'clock now, 11 a.m., and I'm 4.5 hours away in Grand Marais to St. Paul. So I wasn't going to make it even if I left at that second, which I still did. I basically ran out my front door. I grabbed my jacket, fortunately, and I think maybe a pair of pants, but actually, no, I didn't. I've got like my toothbrush. I got my toothbrush, Julie. Okay. And so you stepped up in a huge way today and went to this press conference in St. Paul.
I did. And at the press conference, BCA Superintendent Drew Evans announced that charges had been brought against Bryce Campbell, the owner of Lutsen Resort, and that Bryce had been taken into custody in Michigan.
This was a crime of selfishness. Bryce Campbell put his interests above the livelihood of his employees, the safety of the people that were in the building at the time, and the community that were there, and all of the Minnesotans that loved Lutsen laws for generations across our state. He did that, setting this on fire for his own selfish needs, an insurance fraud scheme to gather money in this process, defrauding the insurance company and setting ablaze to this historic lodge.
So Superintendent Evans calls this a crime of selfishness. What do you make of that?
That rings true to a lot of the stories that we heard on the podcast in the first 4 episodes, that I heard in the many hours of interviewing that I did for the podcast. That theme of Bryce wanted it his way at all times. And you expect that to a certain extent from an owner of a lodge, a very expensive historic place, that there's going to be a bit of, we got to do it this way. I'm the owner. But it was like beyond anything that was acceptable, normal, capable of working with others. So selfishness, that use of that word really stood out to me as I was listening to the press conference, essentially on the radio driving down from Grand Marais.
Yeah. A thing that stood out to me was he talked about how insurance fraud and arson are not victimless crimes.
When people commit insurance fraud of any kind, every insured person in Minnesota pays.
I think if listeners have been listening to the show, they've heard a lot of stories about how the employees have been impacted by this fire and how the community has been impacted by this fire. What do you think about that idea that this was not a victimless crime?
Well, one of the charges specifically lists that Bryce was aware that somebody was in the building the night of the fire, and that's Tyler. Tyler, who we heard open up episode 1 and episode 4, he's the person who made the 911 call. He was as he thought, the only person in the building. Mm-hmm. We now know that Bryce was also in there about a half hour before as well. So that idea that Bryce started, allegedly, a fire in the resort, the lodge, with Tyler sitting there reading his book, getting ready to do his night chores, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And then when we start to zoom out from that and think about the people that Bryce owed money to, local businesses in Grand Marais, Cook County, from a tree service to a laundromat, on and on the list went. The homeowner associations not getting their payment, liquor, wine. I mean, it was just like on and on. So there's that part of it. Those people have been hurt.
Yeah.
How are they going to get paid back if there's money that's still owed? The architects who did the 3rd floor remodel, liens against the property. How this is all going to get sorted out financially. What a disaster. What a mess this is. The love people had for the resort. When we look at the stories we heard in episode 2 of people who went there, it was Dirty Dancing. It was the movie, iconic place in people's hearts and minds and memories, gone.
Yeah.
Now they're going to see the mugshot of Bryce, and that's this lingering thing, this darkness now. When people drive by Lutsen Resort, they're going to look down at it and point at it and say, that's where this fire happened. Someone burned it to the ground, according to these charges. That's going to take a long time generational type thing. Certainly everybody in our lifetime, Julie, who drives by there, who knows about this, is going to think about that fire when they drive by there.
So we should say this is all alleged. Charges have been filed, but of course there will be a trial. The Cook County attorney, Gene Peterson, was careful to mention that Bryce is innocent until proven guilty in the press conference today.
The complaint is merely an allegation, and Mr. Campbell remains innocent until proven guilty. He has rights and is entitled to a jury of his peers. That's what I can share at this point. Thank you.
What do you think is next for Bryce? What do you think is to come as this story continues?
I'm sure that the trial will not take place in Cook County because then it'd be nearly impossible to get a fair trial in our community up on the North Shore of Cook County. So they'll probably move it to Duluth, maybe down in the cities. That would be my thought. And that could take some time. We're talking years before there's an actual trial. There's hearings, omnibus hearings, all these legal proceedings that take place. And that could drag on for a while. So it's not like Bryce is going to be in trial, next month or in the courtroom next month. And so it'll be a while until we learn more. So Bryce isn't, based on my experiences interacting with him, my many hours of speaking with Bryce through this podcast and before, is that he's not about to do an about face.
Yeah.
So there's a long road ahead still, which is also going to add to the devastation and the impact. Dragging this out, It's not going to get cleaner suddenly. Yeah. It's going to get messier, probably.
Well, speaking of that impact, I know you've spoken with several of the people who were impacted by this fire and who the listeners have heard in the first 4 episodes of this podcast. Can you tell me about some of the conversations you've had today as you called, I believe, to give them the news that Bryce had been charged and arrested?
I spoke with Edward, who was the general manager at the time of the fire and who's heard a lot in the first 4 episodes. And he's now relocated to another state, one of the southern states, and he picked up on like the first or second ring. Well, hello, I see that it's cold up north, he said. We made some pleasantries. And I said, well, are you sitting down? And I think he knew right then that I was about to tell him that Bryce was being charged and was in custody. And he took it pretty hard, actually. I wasn't quite prepared for that. I didn't think he'd jump for joy or something, but he said it was more like a punch to the gut. Somebody you work with for 6 years who you trusted. I mean, they were very much side by side, and he felt betrayed and hurt, I would say. And then I spoke to Quentin, who was the facilities director at the resort at the time of the fire, if we recall, with the mask, and that maybe Bryce at one point had attempted to pin it on him. There are people, including Quentin, who felt that was the case. And Quentin was pretty subdued. He was at work, and he picked up his phone, but he was pretty matter of fact, kind of just like, okay, well, thank you for this call. Appreciative, I would say, about me calling him.
I'm curious, Joe, you have been covering this story for almost 2 years. You have spent hours with these people. Now you are the person who's calling, sharing the news with all of these people. What do you make of your role in this story?
As far as my role, I'm just a medium to deliver the other voices. I mean, that's why we started the podcast, was to share these stories, these real-life examples of Quentin's experiences and Edward's, and Bryce's for that matter. Mm-hmm. And also all the other people who have come to the resort and loved it so much, the architect, the Lundy expert who knew so much of the history of the lodge, the photographer Brian Hansel. The platform was created to share stories. And so all I did was sort of create the platform. Mm-hmm. Stepping aside from that, my own sort of feeling about it and my feelings about Bryce and if he did it or didn't do it in the lead up to today and the charges that were pressed. There was a time where I was convinced that Bryce had nothing to do with the fire.
Really?
For the first 9 or 10 months. I remember specifically when my idea that maybe he was involved shifted was the week before the 2024 election in November. So late October, first few days of November, I'm paddling in the Boundary Waters with this writer from Duluth. His name's Ryan Rogers. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that Lutsen Resort guy? What happened down there, man? I said, well, I don't think he had anything to do with it, but it's terrible that the resort's gone. That week, the day of election night, I learned that Bryce was in the building.
And who told you that?
I had a source
Okay.
who told me that, and Edward also knew about it. So
Okay.
2 people confirmed it to me. Completely reliable sources. If Edward had been the only person to tell me that, I wouldn't have published a story probably. But then I had another source who confirmed it, and I published something in November of 2024, right after the election, like the day after or something, that said Bryce was in the building and that he had gone back, the whole dominoes thing, and then returned to the resort an hour before or less than. So I published that, a year ago now, and that's when it shifted for me. I didn't know if he lit a match and started it. I mean, they still said in the press conference today, even the fire marshal said, we still don't know exactly how this started. I don't know if Bryce was down there and lit a match and threw it on some sort of accelerant. But when I learned that he was in the building, it changed my mind around the whole what happened here question.
And why did that change for you? Because he owns the lodge, him being at the lodge is not necessarily unusual, right? So what about the fact that he was in the building that night really kind of sealed the deal for you?
The fact that he initially said that he wasn't in the building. He initially told investigators that he had gone home, got dominoes, fell asleep, woke up to all these missed calls, right? That's the sort of narrative out of the gates. Only later, after they basically had it confirmed through footage on a squad car, a security camera on a business in Lutsen nearby, his phone records, they knew. They gave him an opportunity to change his story, which he did.
Yeah.
And he said he went to get these personal items. He parked away from where Tyler would have seen him enter, basically up near the highway, came down and around, went in an obscure back door type thing, and then left. Mm-hmm. And when you hear that, it's just like, what? That's a lot. And speaking with Ed Norskog, the LA fire arson expert who we had on, he said, yeah, that's a major red flag here. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a hard one for him to explain. And then today, Julie, when we learned about him looking up accelerants and different types of ways to start a fire.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the information that was released today when the criminal complaint was published? What new information do we have?
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest ones that would be new for listeners of the podcast would be that Bryce was looking up on his phone the month before the fire some accelerants. He was researching these things that they found in the basement and near the water heaters, like accelerants. That's new. Then the jokes that he was making on Facebook Messenger and text with his husband, Stephen Day, about burn it down. He kept saying that, and in a sarcastic tone, I'm sure, is what Bryce is going to say in the courtroom, that those were just lighthearted jokes. That's not me saying start a fire, but he makes reference to burn it down, multiple times. That's new. That was new information to me.
After the new information that we've gotten today, are you feeling more convinced that Bryce is guilty? Or do you still have questions?
I definitely still have questions. I mean, for example, we've seen this emotional reaction from the public after the charges. I knew he did it. Guilty. It's so obvious. That's a rhetoric happening on social media, all over the comments for all the media that are covering this. But I heard from Edward that one of the accelerants in particular that's talked about in the charges was something that the business had ordered for the new fondue bar, and that was being stored in an area above where the accelerant was found. So it likely dropped through the floor there.
When the fire
happened, the floor gave way.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. I don't know that for sure, but it's possible. Edward's saying that, hey, we had this, this was for the business. So those types of things that you just have to stop, hit pause while all this emotion's going on. The easy thing here is that we have a failed businessman. I mean, we heard that in the first 4 episodes, and that's was said at the press conference today that you were at. This person was in debt. Like, Bryce would hopefully now admit that too. Like, I had some major financial problems, and the business, and my businesses, plural, weren't working. But that doesn't mean that he did it.
Right.
It's almost an easy off-ramp. Look there. This person was failing, therefore he did this thing. But we didn't see any physical evidence that exactly tied him to starting the fire presented today. Maybe that's coming. We'll hear that in the trial. I don't know.
That was one thing that was asked at the press conferences. Is there a single piece of evidence that has changed the course of this investigation? And Superintendent Evans said no, it was just the totality of the case. And the totality of the case does not look good for Bryce, but I do agree that there is not any single piece of evidence that definitively says that Bryce is guilty.
The hardest thing, as we heard from the LA fire arson expert, is him being in the building.
Right.
And that's when that timeline that I had knowledge of was more like 11:30 p.m. Fires reported at 12:24. And now the criminal charge today actually narrows that window. It's closer to midnight. There's footage of him at the building. So that's challenging when we talk about, was he involved? Are these charges accurate? Will they hold up? That's a big one. But I'm not any more convinced this morning about anything than I was when I woke up after these charges have come out.
All we know is that something has changed.
That he's in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about following these big cases in these dramatic stories is that the public loves a scandal, and now it's been presented to them as exactly that. There was speculation, a lot of hearsay, rumors, and now they've got it. But it's still just a charge.
Innocent until proven guilty.
We heard it from the county attorney.
So there's obviously a lot more to come in this story. I know from talking to you over the last few weeks that you are feeling a little bit burned out on this story. Pardon the pun. Can you talk about what this production process has been like? What has it been like for you to be working on this story, and how are you feeling now that there's a charge?
I felt energized today, as we heard when I said my heart was beating in my throat earlier, that actually almost made me emotional when I called a friend of mine in Grand Marais, who I do a lot of media work with, and said, I'm driving to St. Paul, I'm packing my bag, I'm just running out the door here. That I was finding myself almost fighting back tears for some reason.
Why do you think that was?
There's a lot of emotion tied up in this story. And taking all that stuff in and kind of packaging it in here and trying to produce that into 4 25-minute episodes, it doesn't really release that way. And to be like, whoa, this actually is going down. And that was a lot. That I think that I've been listening to these stories from Edward and Quentin and Tyler and Bryce for a long time. I mean, a lot of these interviews were recorded in like March and April time frame. So I've been editing them with your help, Julie, for a long time, and just listening to this stuff over and over again. And there wasn't a finish line anywhere. It was just like this, it became this abstract thing, and we're just creating this story. We don't even know what the conclusion is. And I feel like I'm going a little stir crazy, just working on this constantly. And also, like, this isn't a big money project. There's not like some public media backing this or something like that. This is a totally independent grassroots thing. So, I mean, money doesn't motivate all the time, but it's also just like, we've already got our small little budget. So what's even the point? What's the difference if it's good or bad? Let's just get it out there, Julie. Come on. I'm tired of editing this thing. Like that type of thing in my brain. And was exhausting. But ultimately, I'm really proud of the work that we did on this. And I said to Edward and Quentin today, thank you for sharing your stories and experiences on this. And obviously can't reach out to Bryce right now, but he did agree to sit down with me. And that's a big deal. I mean, nobody else, including me now, is going to be able to like sit down and have a conversation with Bryce about this. So I'm so grateful for the hours that people took. And most of them drove up to Grand Marais or met me in the small recording space that we had up there. So it's today a sense of kind of relief, anxiousness about what's going to happen next, but mostly just gratitude in a weird way.
Yeah. That's something that's really struck me editing this series as someone who didn't grow up in Minnesota, didn't grow up going to Lutsen, is what a profound connection people have to this resort and what a loss people felt when it burned down. One of the stories that always really struck me is Naomi in episode 2, who says that when she found out the lodge had burned down, it felt like she had lost a friend. And so I think that has been something that has inspired me to keep going on this project, is just the immense love that people had for this resort and the immense sense of loss.
We set out to make 5 episodes of the podcast, Julie. We've now done that. I heard from a really trusted source today who texted me after the charges had come out, the news was breaking. And they said, I'm reading now exactly what they said.
Yeah.
Don't let go of this story. Not just the arson, but why this all transpired the way it did. I think I know what that means, but I want to find out.
Do you think there will be more episodes of this podcast to come?
We're going to wait and see, and we'll let you, the listeners, know how you can both support that and if we're going to do that. Obviously, people are interested in this story. It's the top story on every news organization across Minnesota and probably beyond. So, Julie, we're probably going to keep after it, I would say. But we'll keep you informed.
We'll keep you posted. I think the best way to do that is to subscribe to this podcast and watch this space for updates.
I do want to say that in a place that's built on tourism, the North Shore, I know that this has been hard for people who work to promote that and the beauty of the shore and the destinations. And this is not good for anybody, as we talked about at the beginning. And to bring it all back full circle, this crime of selfishness, as was described today in the press conference that you were at, Julie, is that this is going to be hard for a lot of the businesses nearby. People are going to be asking questions of wait staff and gift shops and what's the deal with that fire for a long time, and how to get to a spot where the Grand Marais, Lutsen, Cook County community can move past this is something that I definitely want to be involved in, and whatever way that looks moving forward. So my thoughts are with a lot of people tonight, and including Bryce, who's sitting tonight while we're here, Julie, in Minneapolis, in this comfortable recording space. Bryce is in a jail cell.
Yeah.
And that's about as real as it gets.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, it is now 7:00 on December 4th. You have been reporting on this since 7 a.m. this morning. I think we're going to drink some more coffee and try and get this out as soon as possible. Thank you for telling the story and for taking the time to talk to me this evening.
Thanks for helping shape the narrative along the way, Julie. This podcast was written and produced by me, Joe Friedrichs. Story editing by Julie Censullo. Support for the podcast comes from Kickstarter contributions, courtesy of people like David McDonald, Don McKeever, Chris D., Jay White, Annie Passus, Connie with a K, Mike Larson, Amy Terrell, Buck Benson, Jim McDonald, and dozens of others. This podcast is also supported by Clover Valley Electric, a family-owned electrical contractor serving Minnesota's North Shore from Duluth to Grand Marais and everywhere in between. Their team handles everything from service and troubleshooting calls to full new builds, underground power and fiber installations, as well as commercial work, including lighting replacements. So whether it's a lakeside cabin or a small business or a large resort property, they bring craftsmanship, safety, and integrity to every job. Clover Valley Electric, built for the North, powered by experience.